All right, we got 7 on so far, 8 people, 9, 11, here they come, woo! Hi, everyone. All right, we'll just wait a few seconds till everyone gets signed in here. All right, it looks like we've got quite a few so far, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, my name is Caitlin from SHFYT. We are from SHFYT at Mile High in Denver, actually. So if you're not from Denver, hello from around the world. If you are, hello from Denver. SHFYT at Mile High is a space that is a Amy says I cannot find the place to check in. Amy, can you see us? Can you see and hear us? I'm Caitlin from SHFYT, and we are a nonprofit business that runs off of large events and things like that we put on. So corporate events, birthday parties, weddings, proms, etc., that fund our ability to be a mindfulness space as well. So with the mindfulness space, we offer workshops like this, online workshops, in-person workshops, and also weekly donation-based classes. So our classes consist of yoga, meditation, all kinds of fun things. So if you're in Denver, please feel free to come check it out. Everything is donation-based. Yes. Here's Rosemerry. She is giving you a poetry thought shop this evening, and I hope you guys enjoy. If you have questions, you can go ahead and type in the chat and I will be here for you. But other than that, have fun and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thanks to SHFYT, and thanks to every one of you who showed up the day after the solstice to listen to poems and think about, as I said, earth words. And we'll start with this from Rumi. On a day when the wind is perfect, the sail just needs to open and the world is full of beauty. Today is such a day. That's what we'll be doing. We'll be opening the sail. Noticing it's a song that I sing, I think, before so many of these thought shops. And I think in part because there's almost not ever a time when it doesn't feel relevant to open ourselves to what's here. So welcome. I see a few notes in the chat. Is video not being used tonight? It's a webinar format, so you'll see me, and please feel free to write notes and questions and thoughts and responses in the chat bar, but it's not a regular Zoom format. And actually, as to how the night will go, this is the way I have these thought shops kind of planned out, is that it's just lots of ideas. I'll be reading lots of poems on the theme tonight, earth words. And then after I read each poem, I'll talk about it a little, and then I'll offer prompts that are for you to launch into your own writing. Not tonight per se, there's not space in between for writing tonight, but ideas for you to write in the future. So what will happen after tonight is we will send everyone who's registered the video and also a list with links so you can see all of the poems. And so the next time, if you want to, you can either write down all the prompts tonight as we go, or if you choose, you could, once you get the video, use it like a workshop in your own home and just listen to me again, read the poem and talk about it, give you the prompt and just put it on pause, and voila, you have a workshop right there in your very own house. So it was so much fun picking out these poems about the earth. And one thing I noticed, I guess it seems obvious now, but I noticed that all of the poems were invitations into the body, and that when we write about the earth, we really are using our senses. It really is an invitation to remember what it is to be a being on the world, a citizen of the earth. And so that's going to come up again and again and again, this invitation to really enter into the sensual. You won't be surprised that the first poem of the night is by Mary Oliver, who's written some of the most incredible poems about the natural world. And I think it's kind of funny that this one isn't so much about the natural world, but about how we might enter it. This is the fourth sign of the zodiac, part 3. I know you never intended to be in this world, but you're in it all the same. So why not get started immediately? I mean, belonging to it. There is so much to admire, to weep over, and to write music or poems about. Bless the feet that take you to and fro. Bless the eyes and the listening ears. Bless the tongue, the marvel of taste. Bless touching, bless touching. You could live 100 years. It's happened. Or not. I'm speaking from the fortunate platform of many years, none of which I think I ever wasted. Do you need a prod? Do you need a little darkness to get you going? Let me be urgent as a knife then. And remind you of Keats, so single of purpose and thinking for a while. He had a lifetime. Bless the feet that take us to and fro. Bless the eyes and the listening ears. Bless the tongue, the miracle of taste. Bless touching, bless touching. That was the fourth sign of the zodiac, part 3 by Mary Oliver. And I love that she invokes all the senses. I love it so much, I turned it into a little chant. And I also love that she instills in us an urgency. Do you need a little prod, she says? Do you need a little darkness to get you going? Then I'm going to remind you of Keats, who died at 23 of tuberculosis. We don't have a promise that we have a lot of time here. So she says, get out there, write the poems, be in the world. What does it mean? What does it mean to belong to the world? That's what she says in line 4. She says, why not get started immediately? I mean, belonging to it. Feeling that we are citizens of the world, we belong to the earth. What does that mean? So an idea for you to write out of this poem is to consider, what would it mean to be a citizen of the earth? What does it mean to inhabit this world? And write a letter to yourself about how you want to meet the world. And I have an example of that next by one of my favorite poets, Mae Swenson. She lived in the state just next door to me over in Utah. This is Earth, Your Dancing Place by Mae Swenson, in which I feel like she really does explore what Mary Oliver is inviting us to do. How are you going to live in this world? Earth, your dancing place. Beneath heaven's vault, remember always walking through halls of cloud, down aisles of sunlight, or through high hedges of the green rain. Walk in the world high-heeled with a swirl of cape, hand at the sword hilt of your pride. Keep a tall throat. Remain aghast at life. Enter each day as upon a stage, lighted and waiting for your step. Crave upward as flame. Have keenness in the nostril. Give your eyes to agony or rapture. Train your hands to be as birds, brooding or nimble. Move your body as the horses sweeping on slender hooves over crag and prairie with fleeing manes and aloofness in their limbs. Take earth for your own large room, and the floor of the earth carpeted with sunlight and hung round with silver wind for your dancing place. That was Earth, Your Dancing Place by Mae Swenson. And like I said, it's kind of what Mary Oliver asked us to do, is to create this idea of how are you going to live here? How are you going to be a citizen of Earth? I love the verbs that Mae Swenson uses here. Crave upward, she says, as a flame. Keep a tall throat, she says, or this whole section where she basically uses animals as metaphors for how she might want to be in this world. Train your hands as birds to be brooding or nimble. Move your body as the horses, sweeping on slender hooves. Gosh, I love this poem. So again, this is really just an example, I suppose, of that first prompt, which is to think about how will you meet the world? Write an invitation for yourself or for others, I suppose, but really for yourself. How are you going to meet the world? So the next one comes from another Colorado poet, Sharon Corcoran, and it's one of the easier kinds of poems in a way to write, which is to say it's a list poem. And often when people say to me, I can't write poems, I say, can you make a list? And I think we all can do that. And some of my favorite poems are lists, like this poem. It occurs to me that the praise poem is certainly a big part of the heritage of writing poems about the earth. And here's Sharon Corcoran adding her voice to that beautiful big praise the earth conversation. This is All Joys Are Small by Sharon Corcoran. Yes, our wedding was an eruption of joy, never to be repeated, but I'm talking the daily visitations, like a flock of finches that appears as I emerge, that circles above the house and me 3 times, exactly 3, before heading east and promptly vanishing above the peaks. The joys so small, they barely register. The sight of clouds lenticular, advancing over mountains, a perk of our geography. Coyote choirs, a cottonwood bedecked with blackbirds, all with Puerto Rico on their minds. A spontaneous hug from the one I've been cooped up with every day. There are many joys raining down as grace, connecting my life to all lives, mycelia groping through the wet and giving ground. That was All Joys Are Small. This poem, I think I love it in part because she does just pay such beautiful, sweet, close attention to what's around her in that moment. This is a kind of poem that I think is always available to us to go outside and make a list of what we notice and praise it. But she goes one step further in this poem, and this is the last 4 lines, which I slightly screwed up when I read it the first time. I'm going to read it correctly now. And these are the last 4 lines in which she not only lists all these different beings, all these different citizens of Earth, but she also then links us all together. She says, these many joys rain down as grace, connecting mine to all lives, mycelia groping through the wet and giving ground. I love that image then, that metaphor of the mycelium and how connected it all is. And that, I think, is the big invitation in this poem. And what I'd suggest as a prompt is to go ahead and write a list poem of small joys. Use your senses. Bless the ears and bless the eyes and the listening ears. And then using those senses, just create this list of what's around you, but notice, is there a way to find how we're connected or to notice that connection? By the way, whatever I say, you should also try the opposite. You could totally write the nature poem that talks about how completely disconnected we all are. Maybe try that too. But using specific, I love how Sharon does this, how she goes back and forth between very specific details, the circling 3 times, and then she just gives us a quick coyote choirs. So again, write a list poem, just noticing what's around you, but then notice, is there a way that you can find, how are we connected, as she did through the mycelial connection. The next poem is by my friend, Jose A. Alcantara, and he is taking, unlike the list poem, he's just having an intimate interaction with one thing. This is Archilochus colubris, which is the Latin for ruby-throated hummingbird. The hummingbirds have arrived, beating their invisible wings beyond the window where buds are beginning to break. They come bearing the light of Panama, Colombia, Costa Rica, the red fire of the tropics, here to this mountain, still spotted in snow. I go out among them in my red coat, hoping they will mistake me for a flower. They buzz close, hovering before my face. If only one of them would touch me, I would sprout feathers and take to the air, my wings tracing infinity, my throat turning to rubies. That was Archilochus colubris by Jose A. Alcantara. It's a very specific noticing that he does in this poem, isn't it? He just focuses on the one species, the hummingbirds that arrive, the ruby-throated hummingbirds. He tells us what they're doing. He gives us a fact about them, where they've come from. And then he brings himself out into the world to meet them. I love how he goes. I totally know he did this, how he would go out in a red coat and just be like, pick me, believe I'm a flower. I just want to engage with you. I just want to play with you. I love how the poem records that play. But then this is what just thrilled me most, I suppose, about this poem, is the last stanza where he leaps into fantasy. If only one of them would touch me, I would sprout feathers and take to the air, my wings tracing infinity, my throat turning to rubies. He becomes a hummingbird. It's so thrilling to me. I love that in this poem. It reminds me a little bit, by the way, of James Wright's poem, A Blessing, in which he's engaging with two horses. And then the last few lines of that poem, he says, suddenly I realized if I stepped out of myself, I would break into blossom. Both of these poems have this idea of the possibility of just this kind of transformation of this ability to engage deeply, intimately, and become so deeply and intimately that we become this other thing, that we are somehow transformed by it. And in fact, it occurs to me that just today, James Cruz, in his Facebook post, wrote a poem about becoming a tiger lily. If you're friends with James Cruz on Facebook, you should go look that one up too. What a fabulous way to honor another being of Earth by writing about it. So this is the prompt. Write about it. Maybe add some facts about it. Write about an intimate interaction that you have with it. And then allow yourself to leap into fantasy where you actually, for a moment, become it. Or at least that it's the possibility, as he says, if, one of the most beautiful words ever in all of poetry, if is the immediate leap into imagination. Always a good invitation. Well, of course, not all poems about the earth are about the joys, as which of the poems was it said to meet both the agony? It was Mae Swenson, right? She said, give your eyes to agony or rapture. So we've been looking mostly at rapture so far. We're going to head into agony. This is Witchgrass by Louise Gluck from Wild Iris. And man, this poem, I remember reading it the first time almost 30 years ago, and how it shifted something in me big time. I think in part because I had a real witchgrass aversion. And what she does with this poem, she speaks from the witchgrass's point of view. And it changed everything I thought I knew about witchgrass. Something comes into the world unwelcome, calling disorder, disorder. If you hate me so much, don't bother to give me a name. Do you need one more slur in your language? Another way to blame one tribe for everything? As we both know, if you worship one God, you only need one enemy. I'm not the enemy. Only a ruse to ignore what you see happening right here in this bed, a little paradigm of failure. One of your precious flowers dies here almost every day, and you can't rest until you attack the cause, meaning whatever is left, whatever happens to be sturdier than your personal passion. It was not meant to last forever in the real world. But why admit that? When you can go on doing what you always do, mourning, laying blame, always the two together. I don't need your praise to survive. I was here first, before you were here, before you ever planted a garden, and I'll be here when only the sun and moon are left, and the sea, and the wide field. I will constitute the field. That's Witchgrass by Louise Gluck. Oh my goodness. I mean, by stepping into this kind of despised thing, she reveals all this ferocity, tenacity, power, this thrust to survive. And I couldn't help but utterly, completely admire the witchgrass. But also, of course, what she's doing is she's layering it metaphorically to be speaking about racism, about colonialism. And this is a poem that really, really pushes us to consider, what is it that we try to push away? What is it that we try to eradicate? Why? I am not the enemy, she says. Only a ruse to ignore what you see happening right here. A little paradigm of failure. It's a pretty big invitation, I think, to look around you in the natural world and see what you think doesn't belong. What do you think should not be here? Mosquitoes, ticks, here in the West, tamarisk. And notice where we humans say, this is how it should be. The invitation then is to write a poem from the point of view of that thing that you think you despise and see what it teaches you. Really, I mean, that's what all writing is, by the way. You know, I think any of these poem invitations, any of these prompts are invitations to know, to lean into what you don't know. You know, I often think about this, how, you know, the adage says, write what you know. Oh my goodness, I think that's the biggest garbage. Write what you don't know. And that's how we have epiphany, right? When you have to do some research, when you have to really imagine this other world, when you have to step into uncertainty, now we're talking. Well, thanks to Louise Gluck for really opening up my mind about what a poem can do. This is another poem that is more of a how poem, about how we might meet some of these things that we first think of as ugly. This is by Cuban poet Teresita Fernandez, and this is Ugly Things, a song. In an old worn out basin, I planted violets for you. And down by the river with an empty seashell, I found you a firefly. In a broken bottle, I kept a seashell for you, and coiled over that rusty fence, the coral snake flowered just for you. Cockroach wing carried to the anthill. That's how I want them to take me to the cemetery when I die. Garbage dump, where no one wants to look. But if the moon comes out, your tin cans will shine. If you put a bit of love into ugly things, you'll see that your sadness begins to change color. That's Ugly Things, a song by Teresita Fernandez. And I love this poem. I've loved it for many years. partly because I feel like she's having conversations, these little conversations between the detritus of the human world, broken bottles, worn out basins. And then she invites them into conversation with beauty, right? With fireflies, with flowers. And she just keeps pairing them over and over. Then she gives us something nobody would ever want to be, a cockroach wing. And then notices with what reference the ants carry it to the anthill. And she says, that's how I want them to carry me to the cemetery when I die. The beauty of that, so unexpected. So a couple other things I noticed about this poem. Here's that beautiful word, if, again. If, she says, you put a bit of love into ugly things, you'll see that your sadness begins to change color. There it is, that if, that how. How are you going to do it? She notices the ugly things, but then she gives it the love. How does she give it the love? She gives all these things as gifts to a you, right? There's some you in this poem, and she's saying, this ugly thing, I met it with love, and now I'm giving it to you, over and over again through this poem. So that's the invitation, is to go out and find the ugly things and notice how. She does it with love, but how might you change the way you see it? And write about that how. How do you shift something you're noticing of it? What kind of magic can you do? How do you transform it? Then, as I was considering poems, about the earth, it's impossible to not notice, of course, how we're not taking care of our earth. This is Song for the Turtles in the Gulf by Linda Hogan. We had been together so very long, you willing to swim with me just last month, myself merely small in the ocean of splendor and light, the reflections and distortions of us. And now, when I see the man from British Petroleum lift you up dead from the plastic bin of death, he with a smile, you burned and covered with red black oil, torched and pained, all I can think is that I loved your life. The very air you exhaled when you rose, old great mother, the beautiful swimmer, the mosaic growth of shell so detailed, no part of you simple, meaningless, or able to be created by any human, only destroyed. How can they learn the secret importance of your beaten heart? The eyes of another intelligence than ours may be greater, with claws, flippers, plastron. Forgive us for being thrown off true. Forgive our trespasses in the eddies of the water where we first walked. That was Song for the Turtles in the Gulf by Linda Hogan. It's a lament and an apology. And it reminds me of this quote from Wendell Berry: the care of the earth is our most ancient and worthy, and after all, our most pleasing responsibility. To cherish what remains of it, to foster its renewal, is our only hope. Oh, lament for the ruined world. Forgive us for being thrown off true, she says. So a prompt would be, excuse me, to write a lament for an animal or a plant or a place that has been desecrated or killed by human behavior, and honor it with specific details of its beauty and its being, and perhaps even, as Linda Hogan did, apologize. It is easier in a way. Okay, it's just easier to to notice what's wrong. It's actually not very hard to notice all the things that are going wrong all around us. Much harder to write a poem that addresses how it could be. I think of this all the time, poets against the war. Of course we're against the war. But to write the poem that's what we are for, what does it really look like? And that's what SHFYT does. She's a Palestinian activist poet. In this poem, on another panel about climate, they asked me to sell the future, and all I've got is a love poem. What if the future is soft and revolution is so kind that there is no end to us in sight? Whole cities breathe and bad luck is bested by a promise to the leaves. To withstand your own end is difficult. The future frolics about, promise to no one as is her right. Race against injustice makes the voice grow harsher yet. Excuse me. Rage against injustice makes the voice grow harsher yet. If the future leaves without us, the silence that will follow will be an unspeakable nothing. What if we convince her to stay? How rare, how beautiful that we exist. What if we stun existence one more time? When I wake up, get out of bed, my 7-year-old cousin with her ruptured belly tags along. Then follows my grandmother, aunts, my other cousins, and the violent shape of their drinking water. The earth remembers everything. Our bodies are the color of the earth, and we are nobodies. Been born from so many apocalypses. What's one more? Love is still the only revenge. It grows each time the earth is set on fire. But for what it's worth, I'd do this again. Gamble on humanity 100 times over. Commit to life unto life as the trees fall and then take us with them. I'd follow love into extinction. That was on another panel about climate. They asked me to sell the future and all I've got is a love poem by SHFYT. Wow, there's another what if in this poem. What if the future is soft? What if we convince the future to stay? What if we stun existence one more time? She dares to imagine what it could look like if we got it right. We need to be envisioning that, poets. Holy cow, that is our job. It's important to point out what's not right. And she does in this poem, right? She does. She's not like she's flinching from it, right? The violent shape of the drinking water, the apocalypse, one after another. And yet she dares to imagine what if we stun existence one more time? So there it is. That's one of the invitations here, is to write the poem that envisions the most possible future for the earth. Use what if. You're going to need to. This is a poem that's going to require some what if. And then also I want to point out her title. I kind of love her title because it gives us a lot of information. She's talking about climate. Everyone's expecting despair. And she turns around and offers a love poem to this earth that we're destroying. Another poem, I suppose, about the relationship between earth and the people who inhabit it. This is a poem that again does what Mae Swenson says, give your eyes to agony. This is Dirt by Kwame Dawes, and it begins with an epigraph from August Wilson from his play, The Piano Lesson. And the characters in this quote are, it's a Black sharecropper, and he's trying to gather enough money to buy some land. The quote is, I've got one part of it, sell them watermelons and get me another part, get Bernice to sell that piano, and I'll have a third part. dirt. We who gave owned nothing, learned the value of dirt, how a man or a woman can stand among the unruly growth, look far into its limits, a place of stone and entanglements, and suddenly understand the meaning of a name, a deed, a currency of personhood. Here where we have labored for another man's gain, if it is fine to own dirt and stone, it is fine to have a plot where a body may be planted to rot. We who have built only that which others have owned, learn the ritual of trees, the rites of fruit picked and eaten, the pleasures of ownership. We who have fled with sword at our backs know the things they have stolen from us. And we will walk naked and filthy into the open field, knowing only that this piece of dirt, this expanse of nothing, is the earnest of our faith in the idea of tomorrow. We will sell our bones for a piece of dirt. We will build new tribes and plant new seeds and bury our bones in our dirt. That's Dirt by Kwame Dawes. And wow, what a powerful poem about our relationship with the literal earth and how the slaves were forced to work the earth, how they were repressed, how they weren't allowed to own it, only to work it, and then how they learned profoundly the value by working it, by not having it. So I have, I guess my idea out of this prompt at first is just to consider, what is your relationship with dirt? As a person, perhaps as a culture, as a race. And furthermore, what is your relationship with owning or not owning your own bit of dirt? Yeah. All right, we're moving back to the rapture. This is Lake and Maple by Jane Hirschfield. And it occurs to me, it's actually mostly a poem about water, which isn't earth, but I guess I was thinking about the earth, you know, what encompasses the earth. And I love that the predominant metaphor here is a pond, a lake, and even the reflection of that lake. This is Lake and Maple by Jane Hirschfield. I want to give myself utterly as this maple that burned and burned for 3 days without stinting, and then into more dropped off every leaf. As this lake that, no matter what comes to its blue-green depths, both takes and returns it. In the still heart that refuses nothing, the world is twice born. 2 earths wheeling, 2 heavens, 2 egrets reaching down into subtraction, even the fish for an instant doubled before it is gone. I want the fish. I want the losing it all when it rains, and I want the returning transparence. I want the place by the edge flowers where the shallow sand is deceptive, where whatever steps in must plunge, and I want the ones who come in secret to drink only in early darkness, and I want the ones who are swallowed. I want the way the water sees without eyes, hears without ears, shivers without will or fear at the gentlest touch. I want it the way it accepts the cold moonlight and lets it pass. The way it lets all of it pass without judgment or comment. There is a lake, Lalladed sang, no larger than 1 seed of mustard, that all things return to. Oh heart, if you will not, cannot give me the lake, then give me the song. There is a lake no larger than one seed of mustard, that all things return to. Was Lake and Maple by Jane Hirschfield. I love how she's so deeply inspired about how to be by this lake. And she just goes into that image again and again and again. What would it be like? I want this lakeness. I guess similar to Jose Alcantara's poem about wanting to become the hummingbird. Here she allows herself to become something that isn't a living being. I guess I loved that idea. So there it is, the prompt to let yourself be completely inspired by something in the natural world. Use that phrase, I want, I want, I want. What does it have to offer you? How do you want to be like it? And the last poem, friends, is one that I wrote, not too long ago, when I was having a hard time about humans and how we are. And then, well, this is what happened. This is Bioluminescence. And after this poem, then we can have a small conversation about whatever you want to talk about. You can go ahead and put questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll have a small back and forth. It says bioluminescence. Sometimes when I fear the small light I bring isn't big enough or bright enough, I think of that night on the beach years ago when every step I took in the cool, wet sand turned a glowing, iridescent blue. And the waves themselves were a flashing greenish hue. Imagine we could do what 7.9 billion one-celled plankton can do. Can shine when it's dark, can shine when agitated, can shine with our own inner light and trust when we all bring the tiny light we have. It's enough to illumine the next step in the long stretch of night. That was Bioluminescence. Boy, I tell you what, it sure helped when I was feeling despair to remember a time when I was deeply held by the natural world. And I allowed it to meet my fear. So that's the prompt, is to remember a time when you felt enthralled by the mystery, the magic, the beauty of the earth, and allow it to meet your fears about being in the world. This is the very specific question then, what does the earth have to teach you about how to be a citizen of the earth? Well, friends, that is all of the poems I have. And I think it's the first time I ever didn't have to cut one in one of these thought shops. We got through all the ones that I was hoping we might get through. And I'll just say right now that there's going to be the next thought shop is going to be about play. That's happening in about exactly a month, also on Wednesday evening. And you sign up for that also through SHFYT. And so if you have any questions, please do go ahead and put them in the Q&A, or if you have any thoughts or comments. Right now I see one, from hello, Denise Gaxtetter. Thank you, she says. Your heartful poetry is a beacon that illuminates the path for us all. And isn't that it? When we all shine that teeny little light, just like the plankton, little one-cell plankton makes the entire beach glow. Imagine what we can do. I don't see any questions right now in the Q&A, but I'm going to just give it a little time if you're thinking about it. Or if you have any comments, here's from Sonia. Thank you for bringing your tiny read large light tonight. Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate that. We'll do a play next. That'll be in in July. And then in August, I think we're doing uncertainty. Here's some more comments. Cindy says, thank you. That was fabulous. Thanks. Joanna says, every time you sing, my heart swells. Oh, thank you for saying so. You know, I just can't help it. Sometimes poems really just seem to want to be sung. Beth says, do you have a favorite anthology of poems on this theme? Ooh, good question. Boy, there's an old one called, I think it's called Earth Prayers, and it's very small little, it's almost like a cube of a book. And I really love that one. I don't think I did any of the poems out of that anthology. It might be over 20 years old, but I think it's called Earth Prayers. Geraldine says, I feel like I've come home to be here. Thank you, Geraldine. You know, it's so true how I feel like poetry itself is a kind of home that just pulls us in and welcomes us again and again. John Mason says, scrolling down. John Mason says, do you ever find it nice to switch off your language function when communing with nature, perhaps just storing the memories for later? Do you ever find that trying to communicate your feelings on the spot, say with a fellow hiker, actually pulls you out of communion and replaces it with inadequacy and distancing, like talking about a Brahms symphony while listening to it? John, I love this question so much. I think about this all the time. The moment that I think, oh, I'm having fun, is the moment that I'm observing that I'm having fun instead of having fun. Yeah, there's an awful lot to be said for being very present in that moment and not trying to bring words to it. These, I think, are two very different practices, right? One is the practice of being present, just being present without trying to create language around it. But what I noticed also is that when we come then sometimes to the natural world or to any situation, I suppose, with a curiosity of, thinking, I will write about this. There's a way that it helps sometimes attune our attention to what's around us. It becomes like our best friend, that to know that I'm going to show up and write about this. I know what you're saying about the inadequacy. So that's why my favorite writing advice of all time, lower your standards, said William Stafford. It's something I tell myself all the time. I just ask myself to write the next true thing, to just meet what is here as much as you can, knowing that it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be true. Now, when we come with that kind of attentiveness, that kind of curiosity, then that pushes away, I think, that inadequacy, and it almost kind of ups the ability to be in ecstasy with our surroundings. I love that question a lot. Let's see. Will we get written versions of the poems? You will. Here's what will happen is that you will get a link to this video, and then you will also get links to all of the poems that I read, so you can just click on the links and find them online. And here's from Barbara. Do you have a list of the poems shared as some of the, yes. So I just answered that. And there, Rob McKim, thank you so much for finding Earth Prayers. There's a title, it's by Elizabeth Roberts and Elias Amadon. I don't know that I said that name right, but thank you for finding that for me, Rob. I appreciate that. Susie says, Rosemerry, I love that you had the freedom to set Rumi to music. Oh my, you've given me that freedom now as well. Yeah, I mean, this is really a sweet way to meet a poem that you love, is to allow a little tune to find it. And I've noticed that it makes it a lot easier to bring that poem, as we say, to learn it by heart. Some of my favorite poems, I have been able to bring them into the heart and have them stay there because of a melody. So it can be very helpful. Let's see. Amy says, Bioluminescence. There was a children's worship service last Sunday, and we sang, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Yes, there it is. That's the whole, they're having a sweet conversation, aren't they? Those little plankton in that spiritual. And Cindy says it's an old school book, but she loves Ed Abbey's Earth Apples book. Thank you for that recommendation, Cindy. And Judy Shatner says, when one of my favorite things to do on vacation is find land that the community has taken the effort to restore. It is so inspiring to walk among. Yes, I totally agree. That might be a really interesting poem too. I noticed that some of my poems that I chose tonight had this interaction between the human world and the natural world and what that's all about. And I think that going to one of those particular locations where there's been some kind of a revitalization might be really interesting to bring that in. And Heidi says, I love the prompt if, especially wonderful when stuck in the muck. Needed the reminder. If is, what if? 2 magic words for your writing process. Well, friends, thank you so much. I appreciate you for joining us tonight. I appreciate SHFYT. Thank you so much. And we'll be sending you the video and links to the poems very soon, and hope to see you next month when we explore play. Bye, friends. Thank you. Thanks so much.